The morning sun cast long shadows across the police station parking lot as Officer Tommy Rodriguez walked toward his patrol car. His partner was already waiting by the vehicle, tail wagging and alert eyes scanning the surroundings. Rex, a magnificent Belgian Malinois with a thick coat of brown and black fur, had been Tommy's work companion for 3 years now. Together, they had become one of the most successful drug detection teams in the entire city. Tommy scratched behind Rex's ears. A ritual they performed every morning before starting their shift. The dog's tail wagged faster, and he pressed his head against Tommy's hand. This simple gesture had become their way of saying good morning, a bond that went far beyond the usual handler and working dog relationship. Rex wasn't just a tool for law enforcement, he was Tommy's trusted friend and partner. "Ready for another day, buddy?" Tommy asked, opening the back door of the specially equipped patrol car. Rex jumped in without hesitation, settling into his designated area behind the protective barrier. The vehicle had been modified specifically for K9 units with proper ventilation, temperature control, and safety features to keep the dog comfortable during long shifts. As Tommy settled into the driver's seat, he reviewed the day's assignment on his tablet. Most days brought routine patrols, traffic stops, or assistance with other officers during drug searches. But today was different. The assignment sheet showed something unusual: courthouse security detail for a major criminal trial. The case involved Vincent Viper Williams, a man whose name had been whispered in police stations and courtrooms for months. Williams was allegedly the head of a drug trafficking operation that had been smuggling illegal substances through the city's busy port. If the prosecutors were right, his organization had been responsible for flooding the streets with dangerous drugs for years. Tommy had heard about this case from other officers. It was the kind of high-profile trial that attracted media attention and required extra security measures. Drug kingpins like Williams often had connections that ran deep, and there was always concern about potential threats or attempts to interfere with legal proceedings. As Tommy drove toward the downtown courthouse, Rex sat quietly in the back, occasionally looking out the window at the passing scenery. The dog had an almost supernatural ability to sense when they were heading toward work that might involve his special skills. His ears would perk up, and his breathing would become more focused, as if he was mentally preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. The courthouse came into view after a 20-minute drive through busy city streets. It was an impressive building, constructed from gray stone with tall columns and wide steps leading to the main entrance. American flags flew from poles on either side of the building, and security cameras were visible at various points around the perimeter. This was where justice was supposed to happen, where criminals faced the consequences of their actions. Tommy parked in the designated area for law enforcement vehicles and let Rex out of the car. The dog immediately began his usual routine of sniffing the immediate area, his nose working constantly to process the thousands of scents that surrounded them. To Rex, the world was a complex map of smells that told stories humans could never understand. They walked up the courthouse steps together, Tommy's radio crackling with routine communications from dispatch. Other officers were already stationed around the building, some in uniform and others in plainclothes, all working together to ensure the safety of everyone involved in the trial. Tommy nodded to a few familiar faces as they made their way toward the main entrance. The lobby of the courthouse was busier than usual. Lawyers carried briefcases and spoke in hushed tones with their clients. Court reporters wheeled their equipment toward various courtrooms. Security guards checked identification and monitored metal detectors as people passed through the screening process. The entire building hummed with the activity of a justice system in motion. Tommy had expected this to be a routine assignment. His job was simple: provide security and be ready to conduct drug searches if needed. Rex would stay by his side, alert but calm, unless his special abilities were required. They had done courthouse security before, and it usually involved standing in designated areas and watching for anything unusual. But the moment they stepped inside the building, Rex's behavior changed completely. The change was subtle at first. Rex's ears shifted forward and his head tilted slightly to one side. His nose began working more intensively, taking deeper breaths and processing scents with increased focus. Tommy noticed the change immediately because he had learned to read every signal his partner gave him. As they walked across the marble floor of the lobby, Rex's pace slowed. He began turning his head from side to side, trying to locate the source of whatever scent had captured his attention. His tail, which had been relaxed, now stood at attention. These were the early signs that Rex was detecting something significant. Tommy tried to guide Rex toward their assigned position near the information desk, but the dog resisted. Instead of following his handler's lead, Rex began pulling gently toward the hallway that led to the main courtrooms. His movements were deliberate and focused, not the random wandering of a curious animal. "What is it, boy?" Tommy whispered, keeping his voice low to avoid drawing attention from the people around them. Rex looked up at him briefly, then continued his focused movement toward the courtroom hallway. The dog's entire body language had shifted into what Tommy recognized as his working mode over their 3 years together. Tommy had learned to trust Rex's instincts completely. The dog had an incredible success rate in detecting illegal substances, and he had never given what law enforcement called a false positive. When Rex indicated the presence of drugs, there were always drugs to be found. His nose was more reliable than any machine the police department owned. As they moved deeper into the courthouse, Rex's behavior became more intense. His breathing quickened and he began making soft whining sounds that only Tommy could hear. These were the sounds Rex made when he was tracking a particularly strong scent trail. Something in this building was triggering every one of his highly trained instincts. The hallway leading to the courtrooms was lined with wooden benches where people waited for their cases to be called. Lawyers met with clients in quiet corners, reviewing documents and discussing strategies. Court officers moved between rooms, carrying files and coordinating schedules. Everything appeared completely normal, but Rex was becoming increasingly agitated. He pulled harder on his leash, his powerful muscles straining as he tried to lead Tommy toward a specific destination. The dog's focus was so intense that he seemed unaware of anything else around him. People, sounds, and movement that would normally catch his attention were completely ignored. Tommy had seen Rex work many times, but this level of intensity was unusual. The dog was acting as if he had detected the largest drug stash of his career. His training had taught him to alert quietly and calmly, but his current behavior suggested that whatever he was smelling was extraordinarily significant. As they approached the main courtroom, where William's trial was scheduled to take place, Rex's determination reached a new level. He began pawing at the air and whining more audibly. His entire body was focused on the courtroom doors ahead of them, as if every fiber of his being was telling him that something important waited inside. Tommy looked around nervously. Court was about to begin, and causing a disturbance could create serious problems for both of them. But Rex's behavior was so compelling that ignoring it seemed impossible. In 3 years of partnership, Tommy had never seen his dog react this strongly to anything. The decision he was about to make would change everything. Tommy stood in the courthouse hallway, watching Rex pull toward the courtroom doors with a force he had never experienced before. The dog's muscles were tense, every part of his body focused on whatever scent was driving him forward. Tommy tried to calm his partner, but Rex seemed completely consumed by his mission. "Easy, Rex. Easy, boy," Tommy whispered, trying to keep his voice steady. He could feel the eyes of lawyers and court staff on them as Rex continued his determined advance toward courtroom 3A. The last thing Tommy wanted was to create a scene before the high-profile trial even began. Rex had always been well-behaved in public buildings. His training had taught him to work quietly and professionally, alerting his handler to the presence of drugs without causing disruptions. But today was different. The usually disciplined dog was acting like he had caught the scent of the biggest drug operation in the city. As they got closer to the courtroom, Rex's whining became more noticeable. Court officers walking past them began to stop and stare. A few lawyers paused their conversations to watch the unusual display. Tommy felt his face getting warm as more people noticed the commotion his partner was creating. Is there a problem, officer? Asked Detective Lisa Martinez, who had been assigned to courthouse security for the trial. She approached Tommy with a concerned expression, clearly wondering why the canine unit was causing such a disturbance. I'm not sure, Tommy replied honestly. Rex is indicating something, but I don't know what. He's never acted like this before. Detective Martinez looked at Rex, who was now pawing at the courtroom doors and whimpering softly. The dog's entire body was trembling with excitement and focus. His nose was working overtime, taking deep breaths and processing whatever scent had captured his complete attention. Maybe we should move him away from the courtroom, Martinez suggested. The judge will be starting soon, and we can't have disruptions during the proceedings. Tommy nodded, understanding her concern. Judge Patricia Morrison was known for running a strict courtroom, and she would not appreciate any interruptions during such an important trial. The case against Vincent Williams had taken months to prepare, and nothing could be allowed to jeopardize the legal process. But as Tommy tried to lead Rex away from the doors, the dog planted his feet and refused to move. His claws scraped against the marble floor as he resisted every attempt to redirect him. Tommy had never seen Rex so determined to investigate something. The dog was acting like his life depended on getting into that courtroom. Come on, buddy, Tommy said, pulling gently on the leash. We need to go to our assigned position. Rex looked up at his handler with intense brown eyes that seemed to be pleading. The dog's expression was almost human-like in its urgency. Tommy had learned to read Rex's signals over their years together, and everything about the dog's body language was screaming that something extremely important was waiting inside the courtroom. Other officers were starting to gather around them now. The unusual behavior of the highly trained K-9 unit was becoming impossible to ignore. Rex was known throughout the police department for his professionalism and accuracy. When Rex indicated the presence of drugs, there were always drugs to be found. His reputation was spotless. Has he ever given a false alert? Asked Officer David Chun, who had worked with K-9 units before and understood their capabilities. Never, Tommy replied firmly. Not once in 3 years. When Rex says there are drugs somewhere, there are always drugs. The group of officers looked at each other with growing concern. If Rex was this determined to investigate the courtroom, there had to be a good reason. But the timing couldn't have been worse. Court was scheduled to begin in less than 15 minutes, and Judge Morrison was already inside reviewing her case. Rex continued his attempts to reach the courtroom, his whining becoming more desperate. The dog was now scratching at the heavy wooden doors, leaving small marks on the polished surface. His behavior was so intense that it was starting to attract attention from reporters and spectators who were gathering for the trial. We have a situation here, Detective Martinez said into her radio, calling for guidance from her supervisors. The K-9 unit is indicating something in the main courtroom, but we're about to start a major trial. The response came quickly. Find out what the dog is detecting, but do it quietly. We can't afford any delays or disruptions. Tommy looked down at Rex, who was now looking back at him with what could only be described as frustration. The dog seemed to understand that his handler was hesitating, and he was doing everything in his power to communicate the urgency of the situation. You really think there's something in there? Tommy asked his partner, as if expecting an answer. Rex responded by pressing his nose against the crack under the courtroom door and taking several deep breaths. His reaction was immediate and intense. The dog's entire body began shaking with excitement, and he started pawing at the door with both front feet. That was when Tommy made his decision. In 3 years of working together, Rex had never been wrong about drugs. The dog's nose was more reliable than any technology the police department had. If Rex was this determined to investigate the courtroom, Tommy was going to trust his partner's instincts. We're going in, Tommy announced to the other officers. Rex is telling me there are drugs in that courtroom, and I believe him. Detective Martinez looked worried. Tommy, the judge is already inside. If we interrupt her preparations for the trial and there's nothing there, your career could be over. Tommy understood the risks. Judge Morrison was not known for her patience with interruptions. She had a reputation for being fair but strict, and she expected everyone in her courtroom to follow proper procedures. Barging in with a drug detection dog minutes before a major trial was not going to make her happy, but Tommy had learned something important during his years as a police officer. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts, even when the stakes are high. Rex had never let him down before, and the dog's current behavior was too intense to ignore. "I have to trust my partner," Tommy said, reaching for the courtroom door handle. "Rex is trying to tell me something important, and I'm going to listen to him." As Tommy slowly opened the door, Rex immediately surged forward, pulling his handler into the courtroom with renewed determination. The dog's nose was working frantically as he entered the large room, processing dozens of different scents to locate the source of whatever had captured his attention. Judge Morrison looked up from her desk with obvious surprise and annoyance. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing in her courtroom. Her expression made it clear that she was not pleased with the unexpected interruption. "Officer, what is the meaning of this?" she asked in a stern voice that echoed through the empty courtroom. "Court is about to begin, and I did not authorize any canine searches." Tommy felt his heart racing as he realized there was no turning back now. He was committed to following Rex's lead, regardless of the consequences. The dog was already moving deeper into the courtroom, his nose leading him toward something that had triggered every instinct in his highly trained body. "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption," Tommy began, his voice slightly shaky. "But my dog is indicating the presence of controlled substances somewhere in this courtroom." The judge's expression shifted from annoyance to concern as she watched Rex begin to circle her bench with intense focus. The dog was clearly tracking something specific, and his behavior was becoming more urgent with each passing second. The courtroom fell silent as Tommy and Rex entered, their footsteps echoing on the polished wooden floor. Judge Morrison sat behind her massive oak bench, her eyes following every movement as Rex immediately began his focused search. The dog's behavior was unlike anything Tommy had seen before. Rex moved with purpose, his nose working constantly as he tracked whatever scent had brought them to this moment. Tommy's heart was pounding so hard, he could hear it in his ears. He had just interrupted one of the most important judges in the city, moments before a major trial was supposed to begin. If Rex was wrong, if there were no drugs in this courtroom, Tommy knew his career in law enforcement would be over. But watching his partner work, he felt a growing confidence that Rex was onto something big. The courtroom was an impressive space, with high ceilings and dark wood paneling that gave it a sense of authority and tradition. Rows of wooden benches faced the judge's elevated bench, and everything was arranged to emphasize the importance of the legal proceedings that took place here. This was where justice was supposed to happen, where criminals faced the consequences of their actions. Rex began circling the judge's bench, in a pattern that Tommy recognized from their training. The dog was narrowing down the location of whatever he was detecting, using his incredible sense of smell to pinpoint the exact source. His movements were deliberate and systematic, like a scientist conducting a careful experiment. "Officer Rodriguez," Judge Morrison said, her voice carrying both authority and growing concern, "I need you to explain what your dog is doing in my courtroom." Tommy swallowed hard before responding. "Your Honor, Rex has been trained to detect illegal substances. He's indicating that there are drugs somewhere in this room. In 3 years of working together, he has never given me a false alert." The judge's expression changed as she processed this information. She had been annoyed by the interruption, but now she was beginning to understand that something serious might be happening. Her eyes followed Rex as the dog continued his methodical search around the base of her bench. Rex's behavior was becoming more intense by the minute. The dog was now whining softly, a sound that Tommy knew meant he was getting very close to whatever he was tracking. Rex's tail was rigid and his entire body was trembling with excitement and focus. These were all signs that a major discovery was about to happen. "How accurate is your dog?" Judge Morrison asked, leaning forward in her chair to get a better look at Rex's movements. 100%, Tommy replied with confidence. Rex has found drugs in hidden compartments, false walls, and places that human investigators would never think to look. If he says there are drugs here, then there are drugs here. As if to prove Tommy's point, Rex suddenly stopped circling and focused all his attention on a specific spot beneath the judge's bench. The dog began scratching at a small gap between the bench's base and the courtroom floor, his claws making soft scraping sounds against the wood. His whining became more urgent, and he looked up at Tommy with eyes that seemed to be saying, "This is it! This is what I've been trying to show you." Tommy knelt down beside his partner, pulling out his flashlight to examine the area Rex was indicating. At first glance, everything looked normal. The base of the judge's bench was solid wood, expertly crafted and fitted perfectly against the floor. But as Tommy looked more carefully, he noticed something that made his pulse quicken. There was a thin seam in the wood that didn't quite match the rest of the bench's construction. It was subtle, the kind of detail that most people would never notice. But Rex's incredible nose had detected something hidden behind that barely visible crack, and his training told him that whatever was there didn't belong. "Your Honor," Tommy said, his voice tight with excitement, "I think Rex has found something. There appears to be some kind of hidden compartment built into your bench." Judge Morrison stood up from her chair, moving around to where Tommy was kneeling. She looked down at the spot Rex was indicating, her face showing a mixture of confusion and alarm. This was her courtroom, a place where she had worked for over 10 years. The idea that someone had hidden drugs in her own bench was almost impossible to believe. "That's impossible," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "No one has access to this courtroom except authorized personnel." Tommy pressed his fingers against the seam Rex had found, applying gentle pressure to see if anything would move. At first, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, a small section of the bench's base swung inward, revealing a carefully concealed compartment that had been invisible just moments before. The smell that emerged from the hidden space was immediately recognizable to both Tommy and Rex. It was the distinct odor of illegal drugs, strong and unmistakable. Rex's excitement reached a new level as the scent became more concentrated, and he began pawing at the opening with desperate urgency. Tommy shined his flashlight into the compartment, and what he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The hidden space was packed with rectangular packages wrapped in plastic, each one about the size of a brick. There were dozens of them, stacked carefully and efficiently to maximize the use of the concealed area. "Dear God," Judge Morrison whispered, her face going pale as she realized what they had discovered. "How long has this been here?" Tommy was already reaching for his radio, his hands shaking slightly as the full impact of the discovery hit him. This wasn't just a drug bust. This was evidence of a massive operation that had been using the courthouse itself as a storage facility. Someone with access to this courtroom had been hiding illegal substances right under the nose of the justice system. "Dispatch, this is Officer Rodriguez," Tommy said into his radio, trying to keep his voice steady. "I need immediate backup at Courthouse 3A. We have discovered a large quantity of suspected illegal substances hidden in the courtroom." The response was immediate. "Did you say inside the courtroom, Officer Rodriguez?" "That's correct, Tommy." "Confirmed. Multiple packages of what appears to be narcotics, hidden in a concealed compartment built into the judge's bench." Within seconds, Tommy could hear the sound of running footsteps in the hallway outside. Detective Martinez was the first to arrive, followed quickly by several other officers and courthouse security personnel. Their faces showed a mixture of shock and disbelief as they saw the hidden compartment and its contents. Rex was still focused on the drugs, but his behavior had changed now that the source of the scent was exposed. The dog sat at attention next to the opening, his training telling him to guard the evidence until his human partners could properly secure it. His tail wagged slightly, the satisfied movement of a working dog who had successfully completed his mission. Judge Morrison stepped back from her bench, her mind racing as she tried to understand how this could have happened in her own courtroom. She had presided over hundreds of cases from this bench, making decisions that affected people's lives, never knowing that illegal drugs were hidden just feet below where she sat. How is this possible? she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Who could have done this? Tommy looked around the courtroom, his detective instincts beginning to take over. Someone with detailed knowledge of the building's construction had created this hiding place. Someone who had regular access to the courtroom had been using it to store drugs. This wasn't a random crime. It was part of a carefully planned operation that reached deep into the heart of the justice system itself. As more investigators arrived and began documenting the scene, Tommy knelt down and scratched Rex behind the ears. His partner had done something extraordinary today, something that would be talked about for years to come. Rex had literally sniffed out corruption in the halls of justice. Within an hour, the courthouse had transformed into something that looked like a crime scene from a television show. Federal agents in dark suits moved through the hallways with serious expressions, while crime scene technicians carefully photographed every inch of the judge's bench. The building that had started the day as a place of routine legal proceedings was now the center of what would become the biggest corruption investigation in the city's history. Tommy stood in the corner of the courtroom, watching the organized chaos unfold around him. Rex sat calmly by his side, seemingly unaware that his discovery had turned the entire justice system upside down. The dog occasionally looked up at his handler, as if asking why so many people were suddenly interested in what he had found. Agent Robert Kane from the Drug Enforcement Administration had taken charge of the investigation. He was a tall man with graying hair who spoke with the confidence of someone who had seen every kind of criminal operation imaginable, but even he seemed impressed by the boldness of what they had uncovered. In 30 years of law enforcement, I've never seen anything quite like this, Agent Kane told Tommy as they watched technicians carefully remove package after package from the hidden compartment. Someone had the nerve to use a federal courthouse as their personal drug warehouse. The packages were being weighed and tested on the spot. Early results confirmed what Rex's nose had already told them. They were looking at pure heroin with a street value that would reach into the millions of dollars. This wasn't the work of small-time dealers. This was evidence of a major trafficking operation that had been operating right under everyone's noses. Judge Morrison had been moved to a secure office while investigators processed her courtroom. She sat behind a borrowed desk, still struggling to accept what had happened in her own workspace. Detective Martinez stayed with her, asking gentle questions about courthouse security and who had access to the building after hours. I've worked in this courtroom for 12 years, Judge Morrison said, her voice still shaky from the shock. I thought I knew every inch of this place. How could someone build a secret compartment without anyone noticing? Detective Martinez looked through the building's construction records, which had been quickly retrieved from the city archives. The courthouse had undergone several renovations over the years, including some work on the courtroom floors and judges' benches. Each renovation had required teams of workers who would have had access to areas that were normally restricted. It looks like there was major work done on this courtroom about 18 months ago, Martinez explained. New flooring, updated electrical systems, and modifications to the judge's bench for better ergonomics. That would have been the perfect opportunity for someone to add a hidden compartment. Meanwhile, Agent Kane had ordered a complete security review of the courthouse. He wanted to know everyone who had access to the building, especially during evening and weekend hours when most of the staff was gone. The list was longer than anyone had expected, including judges, clerks, bailiffs, cleaning crews, maintenance workers, and various contractors who performed routine repairs and updates. Tommy found himself thinking about all the times he and Rex had been in this building for other cases. They had walked past this courtroom dozens of times, never knowing that a fortune in illegal drugs was hidden just feet away. Rex had never shown any interest in this area before, which suggested that the drugs had been placed there relatively recently. Officer Rodriguez, Agent Kane called out, interrupting Tommy's thoughts. We need to talk to you about your dog's detection capabilities. This discovery is going to be crucial evidence in a major investigation. Tommy explained Rex's training and track record, emphasizing the dog's perfect accuracy rate over their 3 years together. Agent Kane listened carefully, taking notes about Rex's background and the specific behaviors he had displayed that morning. The agent seemed particularly interested in the intensity of Rex's reaction to whatever he had detected. Your dog may have just exposed one of the most sophisticated corruption schemes we've ever encountered, Kane said. We're going to need both of you to help us figure out how deep this goes. As the investigation expanded, more disturbing details began to emerge. Security camera footage from the courthouse was being reviewed by a team of federal agents who were looking for any unusual activity during off hours. Phone records and financial documents were being subpoenaed for courthouse employees who had access to secure areas of the building. The breakthrough came when investigators discovered that the cleaning crew had been staying unusually late on certain nights over the past several months. Video footage showed members of the crew entering and leaving the building with large bags and equipment cases that hadn't been there when they arrived for their shifts. Detective Martinez interviewed the head of the cleaning company, a nervous man named Bill Patterson who had been maintaining courthouse facilities for over 5 years. At first, he insisted that his employees were simply being thorough in their work. But when confronted with the video evidence, his story began to fall apart. Some of my guys were offered extra money to do special cleaning jobs, Patterson finally admitted. They told me it was just moving furniture and doing deep cleaning in some of the courtrooms. I didn't ask too many questions because the pay was good. The investigation team realized they were looking at a conspiracy that involved multiple people with different levels of access to the courthouse. The cleaning crew had been used to transport the drugs and maintain the hidden compartment, but someone with much higher authority had been coordinating the entire operation. Agent Kane ordered background checks on every courthouse employee who had been working during the time period when the drugs were likely placed. Financial records were examined for any unusual deposits or spending patterns that might indicate someone was being paid for their cooperation. The most shocking discovery came when investigators found text messages on a confiscated phone that revealed the scope of the operation. The courthouse wasn't just being used for storage. It was serving as a distribution center for a network that reached across multiple states. Drugs were being moved in and out of the building on a regular schedule. Using the legitimate foot traffic of the courthouse as cover. Tommy watched the investigation unfold with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Rex had stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple drug stash. The dog's incredible nose had exposed a corruption network that had been exploiting the very institution designed to bring criminals to justice. As evening approached, the courthouse was still buzzing with investigative activity. Tommy and Rex had been asked to remain available in case their expertise was needed for additional searches. The dog seemed content to observe all the activity around him, occasionally sniffing the air but showing no signs of detecting additional drugs in the immediate area. Agent Kane approached Tommy as the day was winding down, his expression serious but appreciative. Officer Rodriguez, I want you to know that what happened here today is going to have far-reaching consequences. Your dog may have saved this entire courthouse from being completely compromised by criminals. Tommy looked down at Rex, who was lying quietly at his feet, completely unaware of the magnitude of what he had accomplished. To the dog, this had simply been another day of work, using his natural abilities to help his human partner. But to everyone else involved, this was the beginning of a case that would reshape how courthouse security was handled across the entire region. The investigation was just getting started, and Tommy had a feeling that Rex's discovery was going to lead to revelations that would shock the entire community. The corruption network they had uncovered was clearly sophisticated and well-organized, with connections that likely reached much deeper into the justice system than anyone had yet realized. 3 months after Rex's incredible discovery, the courthouse looked completely different. New security systems had been installed throughout the building, and additional K-9 units now conducted regular sweeps of all public areas. What had started as one dog's determination to investigate a suspicious scent had transformed into the largest corruption investigation the city had ever seen. Tommy sat in the police department's conference room, surrounded by stacks of legal documents and evidence files. The investigation had consumed his life for weeks, but he wouldn't have had it any other way. Rex lay quietly beside his chair, occasionally lifting his head when someone new entered the room. The dog had become something of a celebrity around the police station, with officers from other departments stopping by just to meet the famous drug-detecting hero. Agent Kane walked into the conference room, carrying a thick folder filled with the latest updates from the federal investigation. His expression was serious but satisfied, the look of someone who had spent months tracking down criminals and was finally seeing results. "The arrest started this morning," Kane announced, setting the folder on the table. "We've taken 12 people into custody, including courthouse employees, cleaning staff, and members of the trafficking organization. This network was even bigger than we initially thought." Tommy leaned forward, eager to hear the details. Over the past months, he had watched investigators piece together a puzzle that revealed corruption at levels no one had imagined possible. What Rex had discovered wasn't just hidden drugs. It was evidence of a sophisticated operation that had been exploiting the courthouse for over 2 years. The mastermind behind the scheme turned out to be Danny the Ghost Peterson, a courthouse clerk who had worked in the building for 8 years. Peterson had used his legitimate access and detailed knowledge of the building's layout to coordinate the entire operation. He had recruited members of the cleaning crew, maintenance staff, and even some security guards to help move drugs through the courthouse without detection. Peterson was incredibly smart about it, Kane explained. He chose Judge Morrison's courtroom specifically because of her reputation for honesty. He knew that no one would ever suspect someone like her of being involved in drug trafficking. It was the perfect cover. The investigation had revealed that Peterson and his crew had been using the courthouse's legitimate foot traffic to mask their illegal activities. Drugs would be brought into the building during busy court days when hundreds of people were moving through the hallways. The packages would then be stored in hidden compartments like the one Rex had discovered. Before being moved out during evening hours when the building was nearly empty, Judge Morrison had been completely cleared of any wrongdoing, and she had become one of the strongest supporters of increased courthouse security measures. She had worked closely with federal agents to understand how her courtroom had been compromised, and her cooperation had been essential in building the case against the criminals. How could Peterson and his crew operate for so long without being caught? Tommy asked, still amazed by the boldness of the scheme. Kane pulled out a detailed timeline that investigators had constructed. They were patient and careful. The operation started small, with just occasional storage of drugs in the hidden compartment. But as they gained confidence and saw how easy it was to avoid detection, they expanded their activities. The courthouse had unknowingly become a central hub for a drug distribution network that reached across 3 states. Packages would arrive from suppliers in one city, be temporarily stored in various hidden locations throughout the building, and then be shipped out to dealers in other regions. The criminals had essentially turned a federal courthouse into their personal warehouse and shipping facility. Tommy thought about all the times he and Rex had been in the courthouse for other cases, never knowing they were walking past millions of dollars worth of illegal drugs. It made him appreciate his partner's incredible abilities even more. Rex's nose had detected something that human investigators, security cameras, and metal detectors had completely missed. The trials of the arrested individuals had been swift and decisive. Peterson received a 25-year sentence for his role as the leader of the operation. The cleaning crew members and other courthouse employees who had participated received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years, depending on their level of involvement, but the most satisfying result of the investigation was the impact it had on the larger drug trafficking network. Vincent Viper Williams, the defendant whose original trial had brought Tommy and Rex to the courthouse that day, found himself facing additional charges related to the conspiracy. The drugs Rex had discovered provided prosecutors with crucial evidence that connected Williams to a much larger criminal enterprise. "Williams is looking at life in prison without parole," Kane told Tommy with satisfaction. Your dog's discovery gave us the evidence we needed to take down his entire organization. The story of Rex's courthouse discovery had attracted national media attention. News crews from across the country had come to interview Tommy and learn about the remarkable dog who had exposed corruption in the heart of the justice system. Rex seemed to enjoy the attention. Wagging his tail whenever cameras were pointed in his direction, Tommy had been invited to speak at law enforcement conferences about the importance of trusting canine partners and following their instincts. He always emphasized that Rex's success wasn't just about having a good nose. It was about the partnership and trust that had developed between them over years of working together. The police department had awarded Tommy and Rex the Medal of Valor, the highest honor given to officers who demonstrate exceptional courage and service. The ceremony had been attended by hundreds of people, including federal agents, judges, and fellow police officers who wanted to recognize their contribution to justice. Judge Morrison had personally requested that Tommy and Rex provide security for her courtroom on a regular basis. She had developed a special appreciation for Rex's abilities and often joked that she felt safer knowing he was keeping watch over her courtroom. "That dog saved my reputation and possibly my career," she told reporters during one interview. If that corruption had continued much longer, people might have started wondering if I was involved. Rex's discovery cleared my name and exposed the real criminals. Tommy often reflected on that Tuesday morning when Rex had dragged him into the courtroom against his better judgment. If he had ignored his partner's instincts and stuck to their assigned position, the corruption might have continued for months, or even years. The courthouse could have been permanently compromised, and countless cases could have been tainted by the criminal activity happening right under everyone's noses. Rex seemed completely unaware of his celebrity status. To him, that day had been just another example of using his natural abilities to help his human partner. The dog continued to work with the same dedication and enthusiasm he had always shown, ready to follow any scent trail that might lead to justice. The courthouse now displayed a small plaque near the main entrance that read, "In appreciation of K29 Rex and Officer Tommy Rodriguez, whose vigilance and partnership helped preserve the integrity of this institution." Tommy smiled every time he saw it, knowing that Rex would probably be more interested in sniffing around the base of the plaque than reading the words honoring his service. As Tommy packed up his files at the end of another long day of testimony and meetings, he looked down at Rex, who was sleeping peacefully beside his chair. The dog's legs twitched slightly, and Tommy wondered if he was dreaming about chasing suspects or finding hidden drugs. "Come on, buddy," Tommy said softly, gathering his things. "Let's go home." Rex opened his eyes and stretched, then stood up and wagged his tail, ready for whatever adventure might come next. Together they walked out of the police station and into the evening air, partners in justice who had proven that sometimes the most important discoveries come from simply trusting your instincts and following your nose.